kaleidoscope of voices and perspectives which reflects the intricate dance between traditions and innovations, weaving narratives that mirror the ever evolving tapestry of our modern world. I would please like to request the audience to please settle down so that we can begin with our next session. Thank you. Today, together to discuss about the contemporary literature. Literature that evokes literary introspection like no other thing. All in all, being contemporary beings, we all owe a lot to contemporary literature. To lead this topic further, we have among us ardent contemporary literature enthusiasts. One among first we have with us Sammy Jace Kamar, a poet, writer, and editor who has worked with literary societies including Creative Club Gome, State University Nigeria, where he served as a creative director for 2 years. He has also worked with United States Mission in Nigeria, Ghost Poets Society, European Union Nigeria, and many more. Currently, being a student in India, he engages in several works and volunteers here in India. On this noble note, I invite Mr. Sammy J. Kamar on the stage. Next, with great pleasure, I would like to introduce Mr. Winner Madu, who is a poet, writer, and an advocate of self development, who has penned several soulful poems. Many of his collaborations include partnership with Ghost Poets India and Cartoons Nexus of Bard Nigeria. He also is an executive director at Amazon Resource Nigeria. With this, I invite Mr. Winner Madu on stage. Another literature enthusiast we have among us is Mr. Akwaput Israel Victor, a poet, writer, and a narrator. Mr. Okawa Victor has co-authored the published poetry anthology Dear Manners. He has also been featured twice in Writer's Space Africa, which is a quarterly magazine for poetries. He also is a public relation officer and board member at Edutors and a career consultancy. In addition, with being a law student, he excelled as a top speaker for petitioner in September 2023 intra-moot court competition. With immense joy, I now invite such an intricate personality on the stage. Let us now call Mr. Abu Bakarr, who, as we already know, is an amazing poet, author, and a researcher. Our moderator for the session is Ms. Surbhi Thanki, who is a co-organizer for TEDx Prahlad and also a master's student at St. Xavier's College, Ahmedabad. On this beautiful note, I would like to hand over the stage to Ms. Surbhi. Thank you.
Am I audible? All right. So, as our lovely anchor Uma here mentioned, we'll be talking about literature. Literature. When we say the word literature, we often think about fiction books or Shakespeare or probably Jane Austen or great authors that have, been remembered through generations. But when I think of literature, I think of a little snippet of a professor telling their students during a class of teaching epic poems. So the professor said, when the whole world dies, even when the brick and mortar is destroyed, memory survives. And literature carries that memory. All your geography, your economics, your psychology it's based on the memory of the man, and literature carries those memories. So this reminds me that, this reminds us all that one day will all be memories and will all be part of such great literature. So let's be good memories. On this note, let's hear these magnificent panelists as they talk about literature, and let's appreciate their profound insights on the literature of the present day. My first question goes to Sammy. As a passionate advocate for human development and a strong believer in the power of literature, how do you see contemporary world literature playing a role in promoting sustainable development and fostering intercultural understanding?
Thank you for that question. Good evening, everyone. And first, I appreciate all the audience for being here and your lovely self. When we talk about modern literature, people tend to misunderstand that, what it really means. And in typical terms, it basically means any form of literature that came after the 1940s. And we know through the golden age and the golden era, a lot of things happened with the advent of technology and all of that. So when you think about sustainable development and then the golden era, of course, they go hand in hand, because after then we had a lot of inventions, and those inventions directly impacted the literature world, because before then we had hardcover books, prints, right? So a lot of ink was used, a lot of materials which were poisonous to the environment were used. So now we are in the age of where we have digital books. You literally, you have an idea of the author, you go online, you scan a QR code, and everything pops up. Of course, so that has helped us to promote the sustainable development goal, where we're trying to stop carbon emissions, pollution, environmental destructions. We are moving away from hard-covered books now to books that are made from recycled paper. Okay, so we're protecting the trees which are used to make those papers and so on. So I believe that literature, even though in the early age was a causative for some of the problems in pollution and sustainable development, now it can be the solution to the problem it once created. So in the sense that today literature has been migrated online, we have visual and spoken words artists now, so some of the things you're going to want to pen down, your thoughts, which might be contained in a large book, you could record it in 3 minutes of audio, totally safe to the environment, and then you do that. And then you talked about, your second part of your question was, how does it foster intercultural diversity? I mean, I'm seated here with you. That already tells you that it has bridged that divide. So when you think about literature bridging the divide, I was back in Nigeria reading about authors, Charles Dickens, Jane Austen, a lot of people, Rapikoa, and so on. So obviously, from miles and thousands of miles away, I could get these people's materials. I could read an insight into their thoughts, know about their backgrounds, know about their diversity. In a way, it informed my decision to come into India, because obviously, because of the visual art and the literature we've read about India, I kind of know what India is about, because you don't just up one day and go to a place you have no idea about. So what informed my decision and bridge that diversity, because it's not easy. There's a cultural shock you feel when you come to a new place. But reading about what people are, what they do, It helped foster that intercultural diversity. And I come from a country, Nigeria, that's very diverse. In my country, we have 500 languages. Okay, so even among ourselves, we speak languages we don't understand. So already, I'm learning to be more tolerating of people around me, so much so that if I come down here to the state of Gujarat, I'm already tolerant of the Gujaratis. I'm tolerant of the Maharashtras, and so on. So even if I go down to Kochi or wherever I travel around India, I feel like I'm being with my people at home because they are also very diverse. The only difference is I'm on a different continent. And what informed that decision is literature itself. Yeah, so thank you.
That was very insightful, and I agree. Literature does break boundaries. It has the power to erase traditions that are often very stunting. On that note, my second question goes to Abu. As a Pan-Africanist and a prolific writer with a legal background, how can literature be effectively harnessed to challenge harmful stereotypes, promote social and political change, and amplify the voices of marginalized communities?
Thank you very much. Honestly, our agenda works in hands with literature, because if you look at our agenda, we are fighting to see that, indeed, to show the world through literature that Africa is a crumble of human civilization. The pyramid from Egypt and Sudan have testified that, and the Temple of Lali that. And still, Nzinga from Ethiopia and Cleopatra shows that Kwame Nkrumah have shown us what we need. Stereotyping that look at. Also, his poem when it's come stereotype relation. Novelty. He said, the single story creates stereotype, and the problems with stereotype is that they are untrue, but they are not untrue. That was what he was saying. But they are incomplete. They make one story becomes the only story. So the issue of stereotype in relation to that, the one story, we are only getting one side story from the West, and we ourselves as an Africans, we have not written our own stories because they were holding the pen. Yes, the only things that we do is to read. Now we are here with a sword to explain our own side of story. Then since the lion have not spoken, the hunter is always right. So in relations to that, we have many agendas. Those my books like The Political Justice brings about societal change. It exposes corruptions and also caution the establishment of power structures in democracy, monarchy, and autocracy. And it also recommends a new system of government. So in that, like, literature has a power to unleash unconsciousness and encourage questions that demand change. Thank you very much.
It was, I agree. So I happen to have read Things Fall Apart by Juno Achebe, and yes, definitely. My next question goes to Akwaput. With your impressive literary and legal accomplishments, including co-authoring a poetry anthology, Dead Manners, how do you perceive the interaction of literature and law in shaping societal perspectives?
Thank you so much, Thanki, and a very wonderful audience. It is very timely to understand the context of law and literature in shaping perspectives in the world. And for me, the key word there, like my colleagues have put it, is the narrative. Perspective and perception. And so the intersection between literature and law is one that traces back to history from the beginning of time. If you look at the evolution of justice, you realize that we started with very indigenous forms of justice resolution and conflict approach, like retributive justice. I may take back to the context of the African continent. In Uganda, we so much looked at how storytelling affects justice as a concept, how empathy is influencing judges or those who are in positions of taking major decisions that affect justice. And so, in a manner of speech, literature should be looked at as the artist that puts life to the clay. And so law is more like the clay, and the potter or the molder is literature. And so to me, I expand the context of literature and the intersection with law as one that keeps on living. Literature immortalizes law. And so even when you look at the element of cultural clashes, you see that there are lots of judicial pronouncements apparently in the world that have been affected by narratives, by perceptions in terms of the writings of different authors. You just talked about Chinua Achebe. And if you look at particularly how conflict was resolved in Things Fall Apart, Things Fall Apart is a monumental piece of work that has affected how literature is perceived in Africa. And I want to give a very particular scenario when Okonkwo is banished by the Umofia people to go to his motherland in Baino, exactly. In Baino, yes. And so it tells me that people have the power to decide how they can be affected both by their laws, by their justice systems, and by the people who implement them. And so, to be more specific, you'll see that even after 7 years, when Okonkwo returns to the land, he sees things changing. And so, literature and law keep changing each and every day, and they are interdisciplinary. And I believe that with time, it shall be very clear that even the nature in which you can look at how the evolution even of human constructs are coming up, like the LGBTQ community, you look at the woke culture, you see that literature is shaping how we perceive law and justice. And I think in a long run, we can only leave it to time and space.
I agree. When you talk about Things Fall Apart, it was written in response to Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, and we definitely see how Joseph Conrad happened to portray the African civilians as just shapes and figures. So Things Fall Apart definitely is a very powerful reclaiming of power.
And just to add a little there, Africa comes not very different from India in terms of colonial legacy. And so you still cannot escape talking about the colonial impact on how we perceive justice in terms of how literature is portrayed. So the narratives that have been written about Africa, that's why you find that up to now, you still find, if you go to the West, the way in which the justice system may view an African against the law can be different, But I think that is how literature operates. So narratives, perspectives, and perception play a very bigger role in terms of how the justice system reacts to people.
Definitely. My next question goes to Winner. As an advocate for self-development and a passionate writer, how do you see poetry and literature as tools for personal growth and fostering a sense of identity and preserving and presenting diverse literary voices, especially voices that are normally suppressed?
Thank you very much, Thanki. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So, literature, poetry, and as tools to help foster self-development and preserving voices. is very essential. It cannot be overemphasized. And that is because from time past, we've had people tell their stories, and in recent times, we read about them, people who are long gone and they are no more in the world, but we hear them speak again to us from the things they have written. So if everybody should become a writer, we can see that there will be some sort of preservation to the voice of people. Everybody will be alive, even if they are long gone, they will still be alive. We can hear their voices, although they don't speak audibly to us, but through the things they have written, we can hear their voices again. And then I feel it is most important that people learn to tell their stories, to put them up in documents. Literature in its simplest form is just a piece of information that is documented. All right? When people learn to put their stories and their details in documented formats, tell their stories, no matter how good or bad it is, no matter who understands them at the moment or not, they learn to tell their stories. We discover that later in life, people refer back to them and they read them and then they understand what it was all about at that time. Over time, I've had the privilege to read from very authors I revere so much. Like you all talked about Chinua Achebe. I wasn't born when Chinua Achebe, when the story he wrote about happened. In the book he wrote, there was a country. He talked about the nation Biafra, which was a country that tried to break away from Nigeria. All right, so I wasn't born, but through that book, through the story he told, I'm able to relate to the experiences of the people that lived in that time. So poetry, whether it comes in poetry, whether it comes in literature, or written words, or whatever it is, it helps to preserve. It serves as a unique tool to preserve the voices of people, whether those who are being heard at the time or those who are being suppressed. Thank you very much.
I agree. As I mentioned at the start of this session, literature carries memories, so definitely. What we see in literature and what I most am intrigued about when we talk about literature is narratives. So when we talk about post-colonial societies like Africa and India and a lot of Asian countries, we often see narratives of resilience echoing in literature over and over again, and through those stories, we are able to grasp what our past generations have suffered and how we can avoid that in the future. And moving towards that direction, my question again goes to Sammy. So as an individual again who draws inspiration from the resilience of the human spirit, how do you incorporate narratives of hope and transformation in your works?
Thank you. Before I answer that question, let me revert to the previous question you asked me, because it just hit me when he was talking about justice and all that. And to show you the power of what literature is capable of doing, it's not common knowledge. You see literature finding its way into issues of climate change and all that. We often, when people think about literature, the first thing that comes to their mind is love poems, right? That's all we know, He's a love poet. That's all we know. But now it's evolving into something much bigger than ourselves. We have a book that was launched here that's teaching law in cartoon and in easy to illustrations, right? I think. The book that was launched recently. So if literature can go as far as doing that, you can imagine how powerful it is. And I would suggest for everyone here, if you go on Spotify, just Google, search rather, for an album called We Are Poets. Is by a Nigerian amazing poet called Asibi. She did a poem on that called Climate Justice. Yeah. So literature now has evolved. People are recording content that deal with sustainable development, climate change, and all of that. Things that we didn't know about maybe some 10 years ago. It was all about love and maybe activism that we all found about that. So that's to revert to my previous question. And then to come to your question now, and then how literature portrays a story of hope. If you read books like Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, you read Charles Dickens' Animal Farm, yeah? George Orwell's Animals Farm, and you think about why the real portray, what those stories portray, it tells you that as coded as it was a true representation of what was happening. And then in the end of it, you see the light of hope does shine through. You read about books that were written from people who were oppressed, the voices that were not heard, and all of that. So you who is going through something similar, and you read through those things, those histories, and you realize people like you go on. The power of humanity lies in the fact that we can connect and relate to each other. That's what makes us empathizers, right? We can empathize with each other. So the fact that we empathize with those stories, we learn from them, we learn the mistakes they made, we learn from what they did. It helps us overcome our own challenges. So that's where the resilience comes in. We might be losing hope, but the fact that I read from somebody maybe in Cambodia or somebody in Vietnam facing some similar issue, you understand, has gone through something like that, it gives me hope. You understand? And then myself, a personal anecdote here, how I found myself writing was because I was going through a hard time, and I just realized, the way we do journaling, I realized I was good at writing my problems out, okay? And by writing them, it helped me solve them because I read them now not as someone who wrote them, but as someone who is seeing it from a different perspective. So it helped me overcome many of the challenges that I was facing at the time. So someone will pick up that poem, someone pick up a quote. That's how we share quotes on our statuses, yeah? Because we read something someone else overcome. So literature is limitless. We humans ourselves are a product of literature because right from birth we're taught to read and write. The story of creations in many religions, everything that is written is to show up that there is a better tomorrow, which is what we call sustainable development, something that will outlive all of us. So it's very important that, not to digress, but that we preserve what literature really is about, which is telling the stories of hope, telling the stories that people have gone through those things, they've overcome, people have gone through these things, this is where they failed, and this is where we cannot fail again. So of course we learn through those, we learn through the mistakes of our past heroes and martyrs, and then we make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, because if we do, the future will judge us for it.
I agree. As a person also who finds solace in writing your feelings out, literature becomes sort of like a tool to channel your feelings in a way that a lot of other people can relate to it because, well, all of us at the end of the day feel similar emotions. Abu, my next question goes to you. As reflected in your works, as you mentioned, geopolitics and political justice, forceful boundaries are inherently stunting. So how can literature effectively amplify the voices of resilience, particularly in post-conflict societies?
Okay, reflect to what you are saying. I'm from ethnic groups, Yalunka, in the western part of Africa, who have fought many wars, jihad. And I raised up, my mother was a very good storyteller, and he tells me stories, and I was curious because I always wanted to be an author. But when I realized the stories my mother is telling me and my grandfather is telling me and relate to what I'm reading in school, there are discrepancies. And again, I was born in a regime in my country, like we have more than 20 natural resources, including precious gold and diamond. But we have experienced a senseless war for 11 good years. Until now, there is war, conflict, and how these stories are written. I think we need a literature, we need the ideas to let those people know why are they fighting for. If there is, because in my country, like gold, you can even go at the backyard and dig somewhere. Anywhere you dig out, you put a goal. So if the goal is behind my backyard and me and Sammy, we are fighting for it, hey, okay, Sammy, I can say, Sammy, let's dig up this ground and find the goal and share it. I don't need to be selfish. Okay, let it be mine only. So in this, we live now in a world where adversity takes many forms. Literature serves as a catalyst for personal growth. So we ourselves have to look and how adversity, the issue with adversity does not define us. Rather, it's how we respond to the shapes of our characters and the future. But looking at this literature of how advanced it is, of when you are reading literature like the biography of Gandhi, how he raised up, and after facing a lot of discriminations, after being called a yellow man, tyrant, temple lawyers, but he still stood up again and fight. So literature, even if I'm in that shoes, someone said a racist things about me, through Gandhi's story that have inspired me, through Martin Luther King Jr., through Marcus Garvey, through Kwame Nkrumah, Nelson Mandela, Samora Machel, Kamuzu Banda, those stories keep on inspiring me. Yes, I can do it. And with their inspiration, yes, we will, and we can make everything possible. And also, in the other hand, relentlessly contribute most to positive and inclusive world. In most of my book, there are three things I pay key attentions to in my writings, all my writings. One is what? I learn to question assumptions. Because most of those writings against us, with the underdeveloped country, Africa and Asia, they are based on assumptions. First, I learned to question those assumptions. After questioning the assumptions, then now I start elevating my own evidence. There is this of a mere fact that the wall of Benin from Nigeria is 4 times longer than the Great Wall of China, whilst the wall of China is being called one of the wonders of the world. The wall of Benin, who is 4 times longer than the wall of China, is nowhere to be found in the history. So in this, after elevating my evidence, and now I form my own opinions. Because even again, India itself, India were able to retain their own Hindi as a religion through literature. And again, I was having a question with one British historian, like we are having a conversation. Then I asked him, I said, sir, I said, Adam Bridge, I asked him this question. I said, Adam Bridge or Sita Bridge? But others do not know what I was saying, but we as historians, we know. Then again, do you know what he told me? He said, if you call it Sita Bridge, that particular book you read it from is a fiction. Then I asked him, is the Bible a fiction too? Then our discussion ended. Because if you call it Sita Bridge, there is all evidence that there is evidence from that Hindu scriptures which said, and Lord Rama built that bridge to take his wife Sita from Sri Lanka. Whilst in the Bible, according to their studies, they said, and Adam used that bridge when God chased him out of Garden of Eden. So both of them are claiming that bridge. So if you use, which one of them now is true? I asked him, Sita Bridge. But only literature can be able to explain to us this bridge belongs to who and who. But majority of them are saying the Hindu part of it is a fiction. So if you said it's a fiction, both of them are fiction, we have to accept that.
Well, true. And on that note, I would also like to mention that when we talk about literature, literature is not just what we read in fiction books. Literature, as master students, we study theories and such powerful theories. You are talking about sustainable development. So we are being taught theories like eco-criticism that, foster much like empathy towards nature, and it has the power to change the course of thought in humans. Yes. My next question goes to Akwaput, you. So, with your literary prowess again, how do you perceive literature in shaping narratives of resilience? So, how do you think literature fosters that spirit of resilience and rebellion, and how does it lead to transformation, especially coming from, society like Africa, or if I talk about, any post-conflict, post-colonial society?
Ms. Thanki, there is a very deliberate attempt by writers, or some writers, to write off some societies from history. And so while we are busy on stage here discussing on how to stamp our feet and ensure that we sustain resilience and foster transformation, we should not be forgetting that there are people who are trying to write us off from history. But what are we doing in order to ensure we claim for what is ours? Literature plays a very key role here, both orally and in written, in film, drama, and in very many ways. And part of which my colleagues like Sammy has put the concept of empathy. Empathy is one element that helps us understand the intricacies and complications or complexities with human beings. And when you look at even what brings about conflict, conflict is caused by misunderstanding. Very simple. People conflict because they don't dialogue. So I think dialogue is a very key element in fostering transformation, and in an aspect to create a very resilient society, we need to be able to unearth or unfold the files of uncomfortable conversations. What do I mean by this? So for a society or a community to be able to get rid of what causes conflict, they should be able to speak about the unspeakable. For example, you can see the concept of race is a very hot potato, and especially in the West, but for us in Uganda or some African countries, you will find that tribe is a hot potato. And so, how do you bring such a conversation to people who are already heated by the topic of tribe? Because discrimination comes up, nepotism comes up, corruption comes in. And these are the same people you expect to be able to talk about resilience and transformation and sustainable development. So there is a sense in which it is incumbent upon us who are trying to read and write to ensure that we talk about the realities of our communities and societies. It's very nice to write, a lot about maybe other countries, Western civilization, but what are we doing for our people? And so a writer who puts into account the realities of their societies is a writer that is really helping us grow. And in conclusion, I would like to say that one of my favorite Indian writers and revolutionaries is Bhagat Singh. Bhagat Singh and his brother Godse. I read one of the books written by Godse, Why I Assassinated Gandhi. I mean, it's a very dangerous topic, but I mean, literature allows us to talk about such uncomfortable conversations. And before I came to India, trust me, I only knew white about Gandhi, nothing gray. But the moment I stepped foot on land in India, I came to realize that the ability of India to harness and preserve her history has been put into literature. You go to the museums, there is a lot. If you go to the books that have been written, I was able to understand that actually, probably Mr. Gandhi was not a very good family man. He had issues probably that could be up to debate. And to me, as someone who I consider to be my idol, literature has made me to realize that we are all human. That there is a time where you may not be doing well on one aspect of life, but you're doing on the other aspect of life. And so accepting such uncomfortable realities is very important in fostering resilience and ensuring that a society grows along with its challenges.
Definitely. This reminds me of a writer I read. It was a theory. A writer called Ames Zer. He was a France-African writer, and he talked about how, through literature, he talked about how the people in the West create a very systematic opinion about the countries of the third world and how it affects the people of the third world themselves, of how the racism, as you said, racism, oppression becomes internalized as to they start oppressing themselves without even knowing. And that leads me to my next question to you, Winner. So how can one leverage literature and the written word to amplify the voices of resilience and hope, particularly among the youth? Because more often than not, youth are constantly shaped according to the beliefs of the past, and as we talked about, stunting traditions. So how can we leverage literature to subvert that?
Thank you very much. I had one of our distinguished speakers talk about the power of thoughts. All right? What literature does is that it exposes you to lots of informations. And what do you do with those informations? You put them into perspective with your thoughts. All right? It is limitless what we can do and achieve when we think far and think right. So it's not enough to teach people to read. It's also important to teach them to think. All right? When people think, they would now know how to put to work the things they have read about, how it affects them, and how to tune them into reality, how to properly tell their stories for those who do not know how to tell their stories, and how to properly harness their voices, how to properly wield the power of the pen. But there is no such thing without proper thinking. And that is why you see a lot of writers make mistakes, saying things they should not say, and facing the consequences. All right, but if people knew how to think properly and understood the power of proper thinking, they would use it as a tool with the help of literature to project themselves in the proper light. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, and I agree. While we could, keep on talking about literature forever and ever, we have to keep in mind the limitations of the time. So I would like to conclude this amazing panel here. I think we can all come to a consensus that literature is a powerful weapon in altering the stunting traditions that often limit the human civilization, and it provides a pathway to channel our emotions and thoughts and opinions in a way that it can be related throughout the globe. So thank you for your insights. It was an utmost pleasure. And thank you to the amazing audience to listen to us. Thank you.
Now I would like to request Mr. Umashankar Yadav sir to fill. Thank you to all the speakers and our moderator for this session.